Hey guys, DJ Callan here. So remember how for my 2019 games list, I was going to record all the videos throughout the year shortly after I had played the game so that I could do the videos right after I played them? That resulted in my Super Mario Maker 2-bit being over 10 minutes. So we scrapped that and I'm gonna do my scripting just like in 2017, which is easily far better than my 2018 games list, which I completely rushed. This is going to be a video that I actually try to put time and effort into. I know it's a bit late to be doing this in March, but it's way better than, what was it, June or July, which when I got my 2018 games list out, and wasn't even that good of a game. So yeah, we're scripting just as usual. Now I guess I should go over the rules. Number 1, ports are included as long as I have not already gone over the game in a past ranking games list. Number 2, if the DLC came out the same year as the game, and I purchased the DLC obviously, that DLC will be included in my overall review. It will not be reviewed separately another year. Number 3, while DLC for a game released in the past year can be included, it will only be if it is substantial enough. An example of DLC that would not be included is the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Fighters Pass. It adds new characters and stages and music, but it doesn't add anything super substantial to the game. You're not going to be missing out on too much if you don't buy it. An example of a DLC that would be included is Splatoon 2's Octo Expansion. That adds an entirely new campaign mode for you to go through, tons of new stages, new challenges, new way to play the game. Anyway, I think that does it for the intro. Let's get into the list. Eight. Kuniko is a cute indie platformer. You control an oval with legs and run around kicking and jumping. And that's about it. Here's the thing, this isn't a skill-based platformer like Shovel Knight, but it also isn't really puzzle-based. Puzzle platformer is the closest description of the game, or at least the single-player campaign, but the puzzles are all pretty simple. I can recall one point near the beginning of the game where I actually had to think pretty hard to figure out what to do. Other than that, the puzzles are all extremely straightforward to the point where I don't even know if they really can be called puzzles. Throughout this one-player mode, there are also a lot of mini-games, being the game's boss battles. They're all handled completely differently, but because of this, there's never a repeat type of battle. I would give the game points for variety, but due to the fact you only play each type of battle once, they never get to build on top of mechanics, they never get to introduce new, cool ways of using anything previously introduced. Because of that, the whole game ends up feeling like the first level. It never seems to advance in any exciting ways. Another single-player annoyance is the fact that there are locations in the game you can't go back to, but they have missable awards. One of the type of awards in the game are trophies, and without showing you anything from the ending, there's at least one trophy in the last section of the game, and you can't go back to this section after you beat it. This means you can reach a point where the only way for you to 100% the game is to completely reset and redo everything. And to make matters worse, it doesn't consider trophies independent of your save file. That means if you reset, you'll need to recollect every trophy. And to make matters even worse, it clears out multiplayer's trophies too, which are completely separate from single-player experience, and unless you're like Sakurai and can use multiple controllers at once easily, you have to wait for a friend to visit to collect these. Speaking of multiplayer, this is where I don't have quite as many issues with the game, aside from the issue of trophies being deleted when you start a new single-player file. The multiplayer is a really nice puzzle-based distraction, it's not too frustrating, and you can easily find plenty of fun glitches here. Even though it seems like I have nothing but negative to say about the single player, I did enjoy my time with it. It's fun, it's quirky, sometimes the humor is handled pretty well, and the minigame battles are fun. It's just that I wish there was more to them. I wish there was a repeat battle so that it could get harder and harder. This isn't a bad game at all. I mean, you can wear sunglasses, but it is easily the weakest on this list. Ultimately, Kuniko isn't a bad game. The only reason it's lowest on this list is because whenever I think back on it, instead of thinking more about the game itself, I think, why didn't I just buy something like Celeste instead? 7. Well, this is a fun game to talk about. So, Pokemon Sword and Shield came out. I got the Shield version and I liked it. But it does have its flaws. One of the things I really like about this generation is the improvements to the overall encounter system and a few other quirks of the game. Let me tell you a story that happened recently to explain just how much better some of the systems are in this gen. I recently got Pokemon Home and decided to transfer my Pokemon from the 3DS games into it, but I realized I hadn't yet caught Deoxys and Omega Ruby. For some reason, I had a really hard time, and after a while I gave up and moved on to other games. I don't know why I had such a hard time with Deoxys, but for some reason I did. Anyway, I decided I had to catch it before moving all of my Pokemon out of the game. So I had to go to a Pokemon Center to get the correct team before going to capture the legendary DNA Pokemon. After flying to a Pokemon Center using Latios and having to manually fly there, I headed back to the Sky Pillar. However, I couldn't fly back to the top of the Sky Pillar. I had to go back up the building. This location is seen as a cave, meaning you have a chance of random encounter every step. I encountered at least 5 Pokemon trying to get back up top of this one building. One thing I didn't mention is there is a faster method of travel in these games, but it requires you to have a certain move on a certain Pokemon. This means I have to have fly on my legendary Pokemon Yveltal. Now, how would this situation look in Pokemon Sword and Shield? You see how much easier that is? I think my favorite change this generation is the lack of randomly generated Pokemon battles. Yes, there are still random encounters in grass, but now you can see where they are and choose to run into them. Now the new system doesn't completely erase accidental battles. You'll still accidentally run into some Pokemon here and there, or literally have a Snorlax appear underneath you from time to time. But compared to the random encounters we dealt with previously, this new system is such a blessing. Now, of course, as I mentioned, it has its flaws too. Obviously, the lack of every Pokemon is uncool, to put it lightly. It isn't quite as big a deal to me, but there are still plenty of my favorites that just are not in the game. Others are very upset about the graphics, but my biggest issue other than the lack of national dex is the pacing. Quick warning, while I'm not going to talk about the story itself, I am going to talk about when things take place in the story. So if you want to be completely spoiler-free, you can skip to this timestamp. The game basically talks about the legendaries throughout the whole experience, but does nothing with them until the very end. And I mean the very end. The entire story of the game is pretty much exclusively the gym challenge, and you don't get to see anything actually happening with the legendary Pokemon until you are literally one battle away from beating the game. How am I supposed to get to understand this Pokemon's moves, its ability, its weaknesses, without having any battles in between me getting it and me beating the game? Yes, the game continues after you win, but this still does not excuse the fact that nothing story relevant happens on screen until the main journey is almost over. Even in the controversial X and Y, you get your legendary after the 7th gym, leaving a fair amount of time left for you to spend with your new legendary. And there's a nice story leading up to the point you get it, not just one event that was only slightly alluded to before. There's also the fact that you're stopped for unskippable dialogue or cutscenes just constantly. My friend and I have a plan to temporarily trade copies so we can catch the other version's legendary, but my gosh, is it going to be a pain going through all of those cutscenes again just to do so. There's a lot more to be discussed on the game, but I'll leave it there with what I like the most and what I dislike the most. Even though it appears low on the list, I still did like this game, It's just not the Pokemon experience I know it easily could be.
Six.
So I'm gonna be honest here. Leading up to release, I was confident this game may end up in the top spot, and there was no way it would be lower than the top 3. But that just didn't happen. So let's go over Super Mario Maker 2. It has almost everything from Super Mario Maker 1 except for amiibo costumes, online play, way more course parts, new themes, and even the new Super Mario 3D World playstyle. This game added so much content, surely it was going to be better than the original, and objectively speaking it is, but it just doesn't feel like it. The fact that this is the second game and therefore the magic of the original is lost definitely had something to do with my disappointment, and I am using that term pretty loosely, but I don't think that's actually why this game isn't as high as it could be. I think there are 2 big issues preventing this game from being the phenomenon it could have been. Issue 1. All of the personality is removed. The first Mario Maker has a different starting screen for every day of the week. It had a fly swatting minigame. Even though it was a level creator, it was a glorified level creator. The maker aspect itself seemed like a game. This one though, it feels very much like a tool rather than the game. It feels more similar to something like Photoshop. Also, somewhat unrelated, but I like the first game's object menu more. That was just a big grid that showed you everything at your disposal at once, and you could even customize it. Here, I usually get confused figuring out which part of the menu an object is in. What page is that part? It's very easy for me to pass over the object while scrolling through. Initially when I saw people saying this exact thing, I thought they were just being too nitpicky. But over time I started to realize more and more just how nice of a touch these little Easter eggs are. The second and much bigger issue is the lack of support. The first game was treated like Splatoon. Nintendo would regularly update the game instead of waiting practically half a year between updates. Sure, not every update brought new features, but to tide us over between these bigger updates, we got amiibo costumes sprinkled in too. It may not seem like much, but what adding these amiibo costumes led to is people opening the game just to get the costume, and figuring, well, the game is open, I may as well check out some of the trending courses. Because of Nintendo's regular updates, people were playing the game more frequently, which meant it remained in their minds more often, which meant they were playing the game more frequently. You see my point. In terms of 2 though, updates are so far between that I often end up ignoring the game. I honestly haven't touched it since a week after the Master Sword power-up. These problems aren't as big, but there's also the fact that amiibo are missing, and that the sequel retains the first issue of coins not being useful. All of those rewards people hide in their levels often end up being for no reason except it feels nice, I guess. Why would I go out of my way to make a dangerous jump for coins if those coins don't do anything for me?
This brings me to an idea I had that would pretty much single-handedly fix almost all of the massive problems with the game. First of all, bring amiibo back. Secondly, make a shop for them.
This would bring back the one and only major feature missing from the first game, which so many of us, myself included, absolutely love. It would also give us a reason to go for coins and levels, as they could now be spent on amiibo costumes for characters we don't have the amiibo of, and it would get people to turn on the game more often, even during the major gaps between big updates, because Nintendo would be adding new amiibo costumes. With a game like this, adding an Incineroar costume is really all Nintendo would need to do to get it back on people's minds for a month. By which point they could release some weird anime tie-in costume and keep the hype going. Yeah, the game still wouldn't have those little quirks I mentioned, but that would hardly be enough to keep the game from constantly grabbing people's attention. Unfortunately, I fear the game's fate may already be sealed. Still though, I would love to see Nintendo try to make this one the smash hit the original was. If they were successful, seeing it on the trending page every now and then would warm my heart. Ultimately, I think Super Mario Maker 2 was objectively better than some of the games ahead of it on my list, but I personally enjoyed the following more because of these issues.
5.
I never trust a new IP the first time I see it. I only ended up getting into video games because I tried Mario on my cousin's Game Boy. I got into Zelda from seeing Link in Smash and seeing other people play Ocarina of Time and thinking it looked fun. I only got into Undertale after my friends insisted it was worth checking it out. Even with Splatoon, which I've become completely obsessed with, I needed to try out the global test fire before I decided it was worth picking up. If it's not a series I've already found out I like, I pretty much always need some sort of proof I'll like it before I give it a shot. And then in 2018 I saw a trailer about a game where you get to be a goose. Suddenly I do believe in love at first sight. This is where we reach the point where I don't really have major complaints with the game. I only have it lower because all the games above it are somehow even better than it. In other words, the fact this is only 5 on the list just showcases what an amazing year 2019, or at least the second half of 2019, was. Untitled Goose Game is this low simply because it's short. Other than that, there's nothing bad I can say. This game is delightful from beginning to end. While I'm not even really sure I can say this is a plot twist, there is an extra piece of information revealed at the climax of the game that just makes the relationship between the goose and this peaceful village that much more hilarious. This game is simple. It's just like being a jerk goose in real life, which is exactly what it needs to be. While it isn't a grand adventure like many of the games on this list, it does what it's supposed to perfectly, and it's an easy go-to if I just need to laugh.
Hi, it's editing, Jacob. This about half of the video has turned out to be over 16 minutes, so I will see you in part 2.